Just give me your name.
It's Robert Lloyd.
And Robert, you are a freelance journalist.
Correct, yes. I'm a freelance journalist, and I suppose for the purpose of this interview, I was the spokesman for the Furnace Action Committee, the group which was set up to lobby against the asylum seeker plan in the Stradey Park Hotel.
Let's start with the sort of main allegations, if you like, and then we can talk about the history of the hotel and what's happened with since the shock announcement of the Home Office and the council that this was going to be used for housing asylum seekers. In recent days, obviously, there have been allegations that you have somehow, and your committee, siphoned off, hidden, misused, all sorts of allegations. The fund for the committee, which is a sum of over £10,000, and that only a selected few trustees who are not named, nobody knows who they are, have access to this, and there's potential that this money could be not used for the purpose it was set out to be used for. What do you say to that, Robert?
Well, we've always tried to be totally transparent with the operation of the fund. Just to explain to people, the GoFundMe page was set up by myself, but set up by myself purely because of technical reasons. That I was the person best equipped to set it up. I think from the first committee meeting after the setting up of the GoFundMe page, I made it clear to the rest of the committee that I didn't want to handle any money or funds raised for the campaign. So what the committee did, the committee picked three well-respected people who are now the co-signatories to a bank account. So the money, as it currently stands, doesn't reside the sort of GoFundMe side of the fence. It actually resides in a bank account, and there's 10,000 plus in that bank account, quite safe. Now, I think the thing to make clear from the outset is that there's been a lot of confusion by some people because for their own agendas, they've tried to suggest that the funds are there for other purposes. But the funds were originally set up because we wanted a sum of money for the court cases, the High Court cases that were initially active back in June and July, I think. Now, it says quite clearly at the start of the GoFundMe page that the money was there to be used for legal funds for people named in any court action, specifically to do with the asylum seekers plan for the Stradey Park Hotel. And it actually says that in all likelihood, those are likely to be the people most affected by the plan, i.e. the immediate neighbours, the people who had properties in that courtyard area around the Stradey Park Hotel. Now, at no stage was that fund intended to be used for to support legal actions against or by people who may have been accused or of any alleged criminal activity or other civil activity on the site. We made that very clear at the outset, that it was there for the purpose of supporting the people most immediately affected by the plan. Unfortunately, some people have sort of suggested now that the fund should be diverted to support people who have legal costs to do with court cases for alleged criminal activity on the site. That is never the case, that the funds were for that purpose. And so as it remains, the funds still sit in a bank account. Those funds will actually stay in that bank account at the moment because there is still ongoing legal action involving some of the people living adjacent to the site and so on. So they may need support at some stage in the future. Now, we've deliberately sort of left the fund almost mothballed there for the moment, and we'll decide at a later stage what the funds may be used to. Obviously, if they're not needed to support legal action for the people living in the immediate vicinity of the site, then we would actually put it to the public and say, well, what do you think the funds should be used for? Whether that's to support a local charitable cause, to support the hall in Furness, to support community activities, because we're conscious of the fact that during this long campaign, lots of people have bonded together on the protest site. You know, there's been, for most of the people on the site, they've been law-abiding and they've been well respected, and they've come to sort of, you know, create a community atmosphere, and I think that's nice if that can continue in some way. So, you know, we might be looking for ideas come the new year in terms of how that money should be used. But the original purpose of the site was specifically to set up to support the people living in the immediate vicinity of the site. I mean, there's nothing underhand gone on here, and the reality is that, you know, I've been accused of everything from being a crook to being corrupt and to misusing the funds, and well, it's plain nonsense, because I don't actually control the checkbook, and the money still sits there in a bank account which is actually labelled for the Furnace Action Committee. I don't propose to actually, you know, announce who the three co-signatories are, because the level of abuse that I've received on this issue alone is enough to tell me that, you know, I don't need to pass on that level of abuse to other people. That, but all I would say is that they are very well respected members of the local community in Furness, and you know, they will be guided by proper principles as to how the fund is distributed.
Let's go back then to the shock announcement that this was going to happen. Questions were asked straight away. You know, did the MP know? Did the MS know? The council had prior knowledge. This was dropped upon the people of Llanelli, specifically the Furness area. Very short notice that this iconic hotel was going to be used to house a couple of hundred, if not more, men of fighting age, asylum seekers, refugees, whatever you want to call them. When you first heard that news, Robert, what was your sort of instant reaction then?
Yeah, I mean, obviously there was widespread shock in the community when the announcement was made, and I think the County Council had obviously been aware of this plan in discussions with the Home Office. You know, not that those discussions were promoted by the County Council, but the Home Office had told them that this plan was in the offing, and they wanted to stand the plan up as quickly as possible. So I think there was widespread shock in the local community. Now, from my point of view, I think I left it, you know, 24, 48 hours and thought, you know, well, what's going to happen about this? And I was rather waiting to see, you know, what might happen in terms of a public meeting, because plainly I felt it was important that the local community got to discuss the matter as quickly as possible. Now, there was no obvious sign that anybody holding a public meeting, so I took it upon myself to organise a public meeting at Furness Hall. Quickly became apparent that Furness Hall was too small for such a meeting, and we managed to switch it to the Selwyn Samuel Centre. Now, you know, I've been asked the question, you know, why go off and do that? Well, you know, my purpose in doing that really was, you know, I got a background in journalism. You know, obviously I was the editor of the Command Journal and the Stradey Star, and I rather looked at it the point of view that it was something that if I was still in place as the editor of the local paper, I'd probably have gone off and done it under that guise, basically as the local newspaper, creating the forum for a public meeting, because it needed to be discussed. I thought it was very important that any public meeting didn't have any political affiliation. So, you know, I'm not a member of any political party, and I deliberately set my stall out for the public meeting to make sure that you know, that there were political representation. The people attended and they were asked to speak, but nobody. I chaired the meeting on the platform on my own. I didn't have any politicians up alongside me. Yes, we asked Darren Price, the leader of Command County Council, to speak. Nia Griffith spoke. Lee Waters unfortunately didn't turn up. But we had other local politicians as well who took the opportunity to speak, and then we opened the discussion up to the floor. And
you were immediately criticised as an IMBY, as were the politicians who lived in that particular neck of the woods anyway.
Yeah, and that is quite inevitable. Yeah, that is quite inevitable, because it's the sort of criticism that you're bound to get immediately when you openly stand against a plan such as they had for the asylum seekers. I think it's important to remember that one of the things which we set out very quickly in terms of our aims and ambitions, obviously, because after the public meeting we set up an action committee of like a dozen people. One of the things we set out very quickly was what are our targets, our ambitions, and one of those was to obviously save the 100-odd jobs at the Stradey Park Hotel, save the hotel itself, and stop the asylum seeker plan. Now, our argument was that it's the wrong plan in the wrong place. We also made it clear, we started out a petition against the plan. We said that we actually supported Carmarthenshire County Council's policy of distributing asylum seekers within the community in the county. Now that policy has been adopted for a number of years, and we've had refugees from Ukraine, Syria, all different locations, and that has gone on quite happily in the community, where people have been embraced by local communities. The families who arrived here, it's not created any stress on local health services because people have been distributed in the community, and it's not created stresses in terms of local schools and so on. So it's a policy which has worked very successfully, and it's one that we supported. What we were specifically against was put in, and originally there was a time when the plan actually said that up to 300 people could be housed at the Stradey Park Hotel, which is plainly ludicrous. I mean, it was a bonkers idea, and we just felt the whole plan was crazy to create this sort of castle on the hill where people, asylum seekers, would be living almost in a fortified castle in the middle of a very quiet community in Furness. It was the wrong plan in the wrong place. I mean, yes, we got the criticism of being NIMBY, we had criticisms galore of being racist and so on. Well, none of that, I couldn't see any of that apply into us, because we, as a committee, we were very reasonable and rational in our approach, because we felt, say, the wrong plan, the wrong place, but we still were committed to supporting Carmarthenshire Council's policy of distributing asylum seekers in the community. And that, interestingly enough, led to the first sort of wave of criticism. And because obviously there were other elements in the community, more right-wing elements, who immediately took umbrage at the statement of supporting Carmarthenshire County Council's policy of distributing asylum seekers in the community. And they've taken that sort of message, and they've adopted it for their own purposes. And I hear repeated all the time that Rob Lloyd and his Furnished Action Committee want to flood Llanelli with illegal asylum seekers. And again, that is just total nonsense.
They were. I remember writing on almost the first days of it an editorial. And the headline was, "Don't let yourself be hijacked by the far right." Do you now, in hindsight, see that, or in your overview of the whole thing, that this was the agenda, that the far right were deliberately targeting, whipping up, the kind of hate that we saw on social media, encouraging people to become a little bit more lawless, to break the rules, to challenge the police, which ultimately, as we saw, took an enormous amount of resources from David Powys Police, Carmarthenshire County Council, that could have otherwise been used, elsewhere.
Yeah, I mean, I felt really early on, actually, at the first public meeting, it was obvious to me there were a couple of tables at the first public meeting, people I didn't recognise from Llanelli, and they were quite obviously people associated with English Defence League and other right-wing, the Patriotic Alternative and other right-wing organisations and so on. So that was an early indication to me of the dangers that the campaign could be hijacked by other people. And I think on reflection, we probably didn't do enough to sort of head off that sort of banned them off of the past, so to speak. We made a number of mistakes, and which I'm quite happy to admit to now. We didn't set up a Facebook page for the Furnace Action Committee until sort of week 3 of the campaign, and that allowed somebody else to set up.
They were very quick. They set up stuff, and I remember, I remember flagging this up to David Powers, asking them if they had monitored these pages and were looking at the hate speech that was on there, obviously, which was against some of the laws, and that was quite quickly taken down. But I mean, it is something, I guess, that if you had have put something there and gained that element of trust, a platform where you could have filtered out quite a lot of that, but as it was, they very much took over. It became, apart from obviously the people that you refer to as sort of a local people, law-abiding people, peaceful people that were there, we're not suggesting that they had anything to do or held those views. But from the pictures, from the videos, from the statements on Facebook, and from the links to their other pages and their other connections with the far right, Holocaust deniers, quite violent in a lot of cases, some of them having had prison sentences or certainly criminal records for activities relating to the far right. Why do you think, Rob, that they were almost given sort of hero worship status at the venue?
Yeah, I mean, one of the things I noticed initially, obviously, I'd visit the protest site, and and things were relatively calm and peaceful. And I'd have to stress that most of the protesters on the site are great people. They're law-abiding, and they have reasonable views, so to speak. But then, sort of very quickly, this sort of element crept in with a more right-wing and radical element. And of course, they sat there, at the entrance to the Stradey Park Hotel, and they're basically they got carte blanche. Then they sit down in a deck chair and they just bad-mouthing everybody they can think of. And I think very early on, because it was actually unsafe for people like Nia Griffith, the MP, or Lee Waters, the MS, to actually visit the site, and they were advised not to by the police. So I think what happened then was that they needed like another hate figure to target, and I became the person that they chose for that. And it was a case of very quickly, there were some elements there, if I'd visit the site, were quite hostile, and they'd come up. And as things got a bit more agitated, like for example, I can remember being confronted one stage by some chap who I thought he was going to headbutt me at one stage, because he was angry that we hadn't supported people who had been arrested on the site for alleged criminal activity. And I explained that I didn't, or First Action Committee didn't control the protest site. It had developed quite organically. We weren't in command of that site, and everything had happened quite organically in terms of peaceful protesters and then agitators drifting in and basically whispering into people's ears. And I think it's a drip effect then. I mean, these people, again, it's one of the things, I think it was a mistake on our part, and perhaps we should have made more of an effort from our point of view to put more of our people on the ground at that entrance. But it was a case of we couldn't do everything. I mean, our people were engaged in the lobbying, the High Court cases, all the work on computer in terms of research and all of that work. You can't be in two places at the same time, and we were busy actively doing all the sort of back room work, so we couldn't necessarily be on site as well. But so we allowed them to, not allowed, by default really, because we weren't necessarily there 24 hours a day. These people were, and then they were delighted to have that
It became a real stronghold, a sort of a mini village almost.
Yeah.
And I suppose the irony wasn't lost on you that all of these international flags appeared, and yet they were quite hostile to people from other countries. So one wonders what would happen if a Palestinian or Iranian, Iraqi flag had gone up there.
Yeah. I mean, what is interesting, I think, there's an element of the Voice of Wales. They have this thing that they claim to be bona fide journalists, which I would dispute all the time. And they've actively promoted their ownership of the site.
Yeah,
so
there was no impartiality there.
Not at all, because every time I tried to go up with a reporter, be it from ITV or Channel 4, whatever, they'd be in your face and say, "Oh, they're biased mainstream media and they shouldn't be reporting on this." Well, it's the first time I've heard of journalists, actually trying to keep other journalists out of a sort of news site, and actually actively chasing them off site as well. Because I mean, I've seen reporters being chased up the hill and down the hill, out of that site, and that was, it's embarrassing for Llanelli as well. And but they wouldn't allow journalists to go in to report objectively on the site and what was going on there. And every time I took somebody there and I asked some of the ladies there, saying, could we sit down to an interview with a Wales Online reporter or whatever, all I got back then was Voice of Wales saying, "Oh no, the mainstream media, you can't have that, and they're going to distort what you say and all that." But they weren't actually giving them the chance to write or to find out, to do the story properly, and that was absurd in a way.
And you got then, I remember another editorial that was basically signalling the fact that what was going on with the hotel itself as a business venture, if you like, was that there were investment sales going on here. There were rooms being sold. There were investors from other parts of the country. Nia Griffiths, I remember, posted a picture where she was looking into a building somewhere in London, the offices, and I remember messaging Nia saying, "Look, forget about this. You really need to go after the investors here. This is a typical sort of facade where investors are involved, and nobody knows who the investors are, and the investors don't actually know what's going on otherwise." You picked up on that as well. What did you do about that?
Yeah, well, we actually put a lot of research into the investors in the hotel, and I mean, one of the people we had on the committee, I won't name it, but he's actually a forensic consultant for commercial enterprises. Basically, that's his job, is touring the world and investigating companies and getting commercial information. So we found out all the names and addresses of the investors. There was a lot of legwork involved in that. We did a lot of investigation into the company themselves, because obviously there's a complicated structure where the Stradey Park is owned by the Phoenix firm, which in turn is owned by Sterling Woodrow, and there are other companies behind that as well. But essentially they have the same directors and all that. But yes, we were keen to get hold of the investors, because these are people who chipped in, and some of them got more than one room as an investment, but each one of them had chipped in like £70,000 to have their own individual lease of the rooms. And we knew that they weren't aware of what was going on, that their investment in a hotel was now an investment in a place for asylum seekers. So we wrote to them very early on. Spent a lot of money actually on airmail letters, because these investors were all over the place, from Singapore to Poland to Australia, Hong Kong, everywhere, Saudi Arabia, and so on. And the feedback we got very quickly was that these people were blissfully unaware of what was happening, and so we did actively encourage them to take a more active role in questioning the firm as to what their intentions were with the site. So that in turn helped to put pressure on what I call Sterling Woodrow as the main investment vehicle for the Stradey Park Hotel. But we did see that as an opportunity, and I'd have to say that in this, you mentioned Nia's visit to the offices in London, and Nia has had a fair bit of criticism for her role in the campaign, but Nia brought up a couple of times in Parliament about these questions about the Russian investors and so on. And Nia worked doggedly behind the scenes and with us, to help to get some of this information and so on. I think she does deserve credit for that. And I think she was in an impossible situation in terms of visiting the camp, the protest camp, because as I say, she had been advised it was not a sensible thing to do, and rather than inflame any situation, she decided to stay away from that site. But in terms of actually working for the campaign and trying to stop it, she did a heck of a lot of work, and we thank her for that. But it was interesting. I mean, and again, one of the things we set out to do very early on, because it is plain to us that nobody had done any due diligence on this site. I mean, from the Home Office downwards, from Home Office to Clear Springs Ready Homes to Sterling Woodrow themselves, they hadn't done any proper risk assessments. They hadn't done any assessments of what changes would be needed to the building. The site itself is significantly different to any other hotel site which has been used for asylum seekers in the UK, in the fact that the entrance wasn't secure. They didn't own the entrance to the hotel. There were issues obviously with the neighbours who are adjacent to the hotel as well. So no due diligence had been done on the site, and they got themselves into a right faff over that, unfortunately. And because we were able to pick holes constantly in what they were trying to do, and I mean, in terms of the amount of lobbying, I'd like to think that there are people in the Home Office who will shiver if you mention the name Llanelli to them, because quite frankly they've had enough. Our constant emails, phone calls, lobbying of not just ministers but other people on the Home Affairs Committee and other things. We were hitting everybody on this topic, and that in the end helped to get results. And I mean, interesting enough, you say, but when the final verdict came, we were actually aware a couple of days beforehand that the battle had been won, so to speak, because we did receive a bit of a tip-off about that. But we kept quiet about it, and again, it is a case of, we were conscious, a battle has been won. There's still some way to go in the fact that we want the hotel back up and running, because that again, I get criticism and hear people in town saying, "Oh, well, the owners need to sell the hotel. They don't deserve it." But plainly, the owners have got an issue in terms of trust with the local community. They have to try and rebuild that trust. And I think we have to accept they own the hotel, and it's entirely up to them what they choose to do with it. We'd like them to reinvest in the hotel, bring it back up to scratch, and get it up and running as soon as possible. And hopefully they can do that. And I've heard people say, "Oh, we won't support the hotel if it reopens," and all that, which I think is a bit of a dull argument, really, because if you campaign for the hotel and the jobs, then you can't have it both ways. Then you have to say, well, we want our hotel and we want those jobs back, and we want the thing up and running as quickly as possible.
A lot of damage was done, and I remember again talking to somebody on record about what might happen to the hotel, and there were real concerns at the time that somebody might sneak in there and set it alight. Sure enough, there was a fire started. The furniture was all piled up outside. There were reports of rat infestations. A lot of work still to be done, Rob, on getting that, as you say, the trust back, the company to invest. But in general, sort of finally, looking at that result, which is a good result for Llanelli, good result for the Stradey Park Hotel to a certain extent. Do you see that as a sort of a joint victory? Do you, we talked about obviously those people at the beginning there, the majority of law-abiding people. we see no head, no hide of the far right. Now they've gone. They've probably encamped, I think, at an Air Force base somewhere or somewhere else in the UK where they can jump onto something. But it is your sort of opinion really that the rank and file there at the protest had a big part.
And I think that is absolutely crucial. I mean, one of the things which I said about the protesters on site, it did develop organically, and there were a great many I say law-abiding and peaceful protesters who did some great work there, and we remain grateful for them being on site there, because they did help to create that focal point at the entrance to the site to keep pressure up on the Home Office and Clear Springs and the hotel owners. So in terms of these things wouldn't have happened without them. As we always saw it as a multi-pronged approach. And there were a great many individuals as well, the people who were not part of the Furnace Action Committee, but actually did work behind the scenes and had contacts in government and in the House of Lords and so on, who actually did work behind the scenes in order to lobby for this result. So I think it's a credit to everybody really, to people of Furnace, people of Llanelli. Obviously the Action Committee played a part, the protesters played a part, the other individuals who helped to lobby and all that played a part as well. And it was really a big team effort, to get the job done, and great credit must go to everybody who played their parts in making sure that worked.
So you're looking forward to a day now where the Stradey Park that we all know and love and used to frequent for all sorts of things really will be restored to its former glory.
Absolutely, because one of the things which you have to bear in mind is we're trying to develop Llanelli and Carmarthenshire as a tourism economy. So to lose that many beds in one fell swoop and that many hospitality jobs is disastrous for the local economy. Yes, we want the hotel back up and running as quickly as possible, because it's vital for Llanelli's tourism economy to have that level of a 4-star hotel central to Carmarthenshire. In terms of visitors, we've got people coming to the racecourse, the Millennium Coastal Park, coming to rugby games at the Scarlets, coming to Pembrey Country Park for motorsport. We need that facility back as quickly as possible, so that Llanelli can once again reap the benefits of that tourism economy.
Rob Lloyd, many thanks for speaking to us.